Hello Idle Hero fans, thank you for tuning in today, as I'm going to be doing a video covering which 10-star heroes that you should make, and by extension which ones you probably should avoid. I'm labeling this as a beginner's tutorial, whereas it's probably more of an intermediate stage tutorial, but for the sake of consistency I decided to keep the same name. As well, big shout out to Gaming with Geo's channel, who just hit 1,000 subs. Congrats, man. That's awesome that you're making such awesome progress so quickly. And if you guys are looking for more Idle Heroes content, definitely go check out his channel, Gaming with Geo. I'll have it posted in the description and pinned comment below. So anyway, let's get started. For Shadow Faction, there's actually quite a few options you have when it comes to making a 10-star. Aiden being the first one, he's very strong. He has the ability to do tons of damage to the whole enemy team. But the only problem with him is that, of course, he requires your teammates to be destroyed before he can really go off due to the smash, or was it vulnerable ability. And before then he's okay, but he actually has a little bit more relevance now than before, because he has this 100% chance to silence warriors for 2 rounds. And he gains the 20% attack. But warriors are pretty predominant right now, so being able to silence them is very effective, and for that reason I consider Aiden a pretty good choice. The second one would be Karma. Karma is probably the most underrated hero right now, simply because, well, one reason being that I've been shit-talking her for forever, but secondly because a lot of people don't notice, or didn't notice, that her speed has gotten a big buff over the last few patches. And now she sits as the second fastest hero in the game, meaning that her crowd control is actually useful now. When she hits the back line for a 35 chance to petrify them, that's just amazing. That's actually a really high % chance to silence, or to petrify. And petrify is just as good as stun. We're not talking about silence, where silence is kind of like a double-edged sword. Petrify is an amazing stun. So to be able to have that on the back line at 35% is incredibly powerful, and not to be underrated. Definitely worth making Karma on your team. The third one would be Walter. Walter is, again, another assassin. Like I said, he's the first assassin that you would bring up in the Shadow Faction. He just does an incredible amount of damage, but the thing about him is that he gains this 50% reduced damage for 2 rounds, and his ability cannot be dodged. And as you'll see later on in this video, the ability to not miss is actually very important right now. So having this, he does great damage. He actually has survivability despite his kind of poor HP due to the 50% damage reduction, and the fact that he can't be dodged, and himself can stun opponents for 50% chance. While that's not great because it's only 2 targets, 50% chance is pretty high. So on average, you'll get at least one of those stuns. That's a very fair hero. Lots of damage, chance for stuns. It can't be missed, and has damage reduction. So you really can't go wrong. And the last one is Bloodblade. Now, Bloodblade is a little bit different. He does probably just as much damage as Walter, but I'm pretty sure he does considerably more damage to PvE. And that's one of the big things about Bloodblade, is that he does well in PvP, but because of how well he excels in PvE, he can give you an edge in both worlds, where you can get ahead in the Aspen Dungeon, you can get ahead in the Brave Trials, in the Marauder bosses, in the Guild bosses, just with this one hero. And he doesn't really lack in PvP either. But to be fair, he isn't what he used to be. At 9-star, he was kind of a monster just because his stats were so much higher than everybody else's. But at 10-star, he's fallen in line, which is good, because I'd rather see heroes that are more equal on footing and have reasons to pick one over the other than to just have one really dominant hero. And Bloodblade has finally been pushed into that kind of category where you could choose him or Walter, and both have their negatives and positives. Or you could go with something like Karma, which also has negatives and positives, and it would be a completely fair trade-off. But not much has changed about Bloodblade. He just has great survivability, great damage, and he's probably the only really like tank killer of the bunch. Walter is okay for that as well, but I think Bloodblade is the tank killer, just because he can survive oftentimes as long as tanks can if he's killing other units, plus the bleed that you get from his abilities is just fantastic. Alright, so let's go look at Fortress. And Fortress is overloaded when it comes to heroes, so I'm going to try and breeze through these a little bit quickly. This isn't meant to be an indicator of what heroes are, why heroes are good, but just so much as which ones are good. And the first one is Iceblink. Iceblink has amazing crowd control with decent tank stats. His HP is fairly high, and then you have the fact that he also lowers your opponent's attack while increasing his own attack. The only risk you run here is now that heroes are starting to get significantly stronger due to 10-star bonuses, he can die in the first round or get crowd controlled in the first round, and then becomes irrelevant in the it becomes irrelevant in the second and third round. But that's something that doesn't always happen, and his value becomes even greater when you have the energy artifact. There's an orange energy artifact that starts him off with full energy, and then he just throws crowd control out on first turn, and that makes Ice Blink stupid strong. So if you have that, Ice Blink is probably one of the best heroes in the game. He's not just an acceptable 10-star, he's probably one of the best. So the next one is Mickey, and Mickey is a little bit of an exception. She is insanely strong and does good damage, but I don't know if I'd put her in her team by herself without another hero like Emily, for example, because you kind of want heroes like this to work in tandem with one another. Her and Ormus and Emily have an incredible synergy, but if they're not working together, they're just kind of like, they're cogs that they don't really fit into into any team the way they would fit together. And so you look at Mickey, and she does do a ton of damage. Now that's really the thing, is not much has changed from her 10 to her 9-star in functionality, except for the fact that she actually does a lot of damage now. She's not doing the most, but she can keep up as a DPS unit while simultaneously being a super troll tank due to her dodge stats. So that's just something to look forward to. If you can combine her with Emily, she is going to wreck house and be a nuisance on your team. The next one is Ormus, and Ormus, I mean, do I even need to state this at this point? This guy is so busted right now. The healing stats, it's just too much. Like, idle hero devs, meh, whoever has the integrity to do it, fucking nerf this guy. Like, bring this guy down. It's too much. Ormus is too strong, and he's obviously an outlier compared to the other heroes, and the fact that it's taken this long for something to happen is kind of sad on both fronts. So hopefully someone does something about this sooner rather than later, because it's getting out of hand. This guy needs to be nerfed. But if the current trend continues, this guy will just continue to be a ridiculous healing machine and will be the best hero on your team in most fights, because his heal is just out of this world when it comes to how much he actually does. I've seen fights where he heals between 3 and 7 million HP, depending on how long the fight goes, and you're looking at 7 million damage. Like, there's no hero that does really 7 million damage. Like, so he is going to output so much more healing than the units are going to deal damage, that he's going to negate heroes. He's going to negate on average 2 to 2.5 heroes per fight, and that's as one hero. So obviously the math works out for him a bit too well, but since that is the case, make Ormus. The next one is Emily, and I think this is another one where you want to have her on your team with someone like Mickey, because you look at something like Void Nightmare, and this is reducing opponent's hit, and reducing opponent's hit is not too bad even under most circumstances, because a lot of units get hit from the guild tech tree, but especially when they're fighting against Mickey. If you have Emily and Mickey working together, she boosts up their damage, she boosts up their speed, she boosts up, or she lowers the opponent's ability to hit, and you've got an incredible duo. Pair that again on top of the broken Ormus, and nobody dies on your team. It's just so hard to kill the enemy team when they're running like this. It's ridiculously strong. And even without Mickey, though, I feel like Mickey can't work without Emily, but Emily can work without Mickey to a lesser extent. Her abilities are actually super strong, and the fact that she also gives attack when she dies is actually really underrated, because this can give your team a huge boon, especially if paired with something like an Aiden, where if she dies, Aiden's getting an attack buff or armor break and stuff like that, and then gets this additional attack buff as it is, and then reduces the opponent's armor. It's just from this one hero dying, Aiden can start murking the whole enemy team, which is absolutely nonsense. Then we have Flame Strike. Again, there's not really much to say about Flame Strike. She's pretty much just like Aiden 2.0. A little bit more HP, a little bit more damage. Or I think she actually does a little bit less damage, unless like you have, say, 3 on your team and 3 on your opponent's team die. If it's primarily your team that's dying, I think that Aiden is better. But if it's a mix of both, then Flame Strike comes in handy. The only thing is that Flame Strike is more about pure damage, whereas Aiden can actually stun or silence warriors now, and that's actually pretty valuable. And that's what I think keeps them pretty similar, is that Flame Strike will do more damage under most circumstances, but Aiden can actually shut down some other heroes, which include Sigmund. And Sigmund is such a beast right now. it's starting to become more and more obvious now that people are hitting 10 stars with him, but his damage is off the charts. Like, he's probably one of the few heroes that can actually keep up with with Ormus in terms of Ormus's healing can actually kind of be negated by Sigmund, but of course not entirely, because Sigmund only hits 3 targets instead of the 6, so even if he is able to out deal damage to those 3 units, the other 3 units are still going to heal up plenty. But Sigmund is one of the few heroes that can actually deal damage significant enough to keep up with Ormus. I think he's the only one, honestly, and he's also one of the tankiest, so it's kind of he's another one of those heroes that really needs to be given the stink eye by developers and put in their place. Alright, so we're looking at the Abyss faction now. And Abyss faction is a little bit less dense than the other ones. There's mainly 3 heroes here that you're going to look at. The first one being Margaret. Margaret still serves her role as before with this kind of 9-star, 10-star tank where you put her as a tank and then Toxic Skin and Margaret's Gift just destroy the opponents. The only thing is that it seems like because the enemies have kind of scaled up again in power and as well as in crowd control, that she probably won't be getting Poison Blast off under certain circumstances, which means she's not going to be as valuable as she was before. She's still very good, but I think she's just kind of shifted down 1 tier, whereas before she might have been like God tier or high tier, and now she's just more of like a medium acceptable hero. I wouldn't consider it a mistake to have Margaret on your team, but she's not what she was before. Queen, on the other hand, has kind of dethroned her, and I guess that makes sense considering the name. She kind of took her position back as the #1 kind of Abyss DPS tank, and because of that, the reason why that is because her HP is significantly higher. She has like 100,000 base HP, and that gets multiplied with the guild tech and armor, so of course you're going to get more results out of that as well. Plus her ability to reduce the enemy's crit, which reduces their damage, which increases her longevity as well as her teammates. The image is kind of glitching out there. I don't know if that's Nox or if that's just the server. As well as her ability also reduces crit. So crit and crit damage. So her ability to kind of lower your opponent's damage is very similar to Ice Blink's, but instead of having the same problem that Ice Blink has, where his damage can sometimes not get put out, her damage will always get put out because a large chunk of it is in counterattack, and counterattack is very hard to negate. The only way you're going to do that is to crowd control her on first turn, which is kind of rare. It can happen, especially with those 50% energy artifacts going around. So overall, I think Queen is a little bit lesser effectiveness than Ice Blink, but still very, very strong and not to be underrated. And the last one is going to be Brea, but as you've seen from my last video, he's more of a back row tank. His HP is insane, and if you can get him to survive till 6th turn, he kills everybody. He can one-shot the backline. It's absolutely ridiculous. His suppressed strike does so much damage. It's absolutely ridiculous how much this will do with the crit and the crit damage modifiers at hand. He just goes crazy. I'm not going to go too much detail with him now because I made a full video dedicated to him. So if you guys check that out, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Brea is a beast. I will give honorable mentions right now to Dentalion, who I think is pretty good as well, but I don't really have enough data to show if he's actually strong enough to be put on this list. So if you have seen enough of Dentalion to make a conscious choice to put him on your team, then I can understand that, because it seems like his healing and damage is actually pretty good, but I just don't know if it's enough, because his HP is a little low for a tank, but his armor's really high, and the healing is of course amazing. And then of course, like I said before, because he has there's a lot of warriors in the meta right now, he does a ton of damage to warriors, so it's hard to say if Dentalion really fits in. He might be like a normal hero or like an average hero in most circumstances, but if your opponent has like 2 or more warriors, he might excel, so he almost becomes a counter hero who is acceptable under most circumstances. And of course, Scry, whatever. Still not really enough data. Haven't really seen enough teams fight with him to really get an idea of a 10-star. I don't think I've even seen one 10-star of him yet, so I can't really put too much opinion on him yet. So that's kind of, you're gonna have to make your own decision when it comes to him. Forest is even less impactful than Abyss. It basically just comes down to Demon Hunter, who is an amazing hero. Again, if you put that 50% energy artifact on her and she gets that 50% crit off on turn 1, or not crit, sorry, 50% silence off on all opponents on turn 1, that is so debilitating. Now, I think it actually might not be as debilitating as Ice Blinks though, because they're still going to be charging up their meter, which means like on turn 3 or 4, they're going to go crazy with their abilities. If you cannot kill them between turn 3 and 4, you're going to have some problems, because their ability is going to be powered up because of the way that crowd control works and the way that silence is kind of an ineffective crowd control. But this still gives you a huge leg up in the early first rounds. If you can kill off 1 or 2 of their heroes, regardless to the fact that they're powering up, they're probably not going to have enough actual steam to kind of roll over you. So she can be super impactful, and her damage is always respectable. It's not amazing, but because you can get that silence off early and kill a chunk of your opponents before they can really retaliate, her crit damage and her attack starts to really ramp up a nice bit, and that's amazing. So I definitely would not underrate Demon Hunter. She's probably my favorite forest hero, and she's the one I'm aiming most towards. The second one would be Rosa. Rosa, again, I actually don't like. I don't mind this character, and I know that he's useful because his ability is like a second aura, effectively. But the problem is that I feel like it's hard to choose him over Demon Hunter because of how important crowd control is right now. But the fact that his ability increases attack and decreases your opponent's attack, increases your ally's attack, and then puts this critical strike mark is actually really strong. But his attack is a little low, but of course you can complement that in other ways, and you can actually use him as a tank. He has 420,000 attack, or a HP, sorry. I wish he had 420,000 attack. But with all that HP, and the fact that you can add a lot of dodge to him through the guild tech tree and through his stone and his artifact, you can actually make this guy an incredible tank, and he becomes kind of like a menace like Mickey does. You pair him with Emily, and all of a sudden you've got another really menacing problem where it's super hard to kill these guys. They're buffing and debuffing your team at an incredible rate, and it's going to be really hard to stop that. So, I guess the only honorable mention I could really make for this one would probably be Gru. I don't like Gru because he's just a HP wall. He doesn't do as much as the other HP walls do. If you want something like that, go with Sigmund, or go with a DPS ranger like Ice Blink or Queen. I find those heroes much more effective than Gru. And Malisa is actually not as bad as she was before. Her damage has been upped pretty good to the point where it's actually respectable. A few teams are starting to run her, and if you run her in a team with Ormus and the Bambi pet, because they survived so long, Malisa's damage starts to tick off really well over the course of a longer fight. So she's good in a team that synergizes with her, but not on the average team, I feel. That's why I don't really consider her to be that strong, but under the right circumstances, she can be amazing. Now, when it comes to Dark and Light, I'm not really going to get into it too much. I'm just going to say which one I think is the best, because all Dark and Light heroes are actually really good. Dark and Light heroes, they're just too rare to really be picky. If you can get one or the other, you're probably going to do exceptionally well with that hero. My favorite Dark is Dark Arthendal, very fitting name. The fact that she has crowd control and energy steal is just so effective. I just love that combo, and her HP is actually fairly high. But I guess that's an attribute that kind of Dark and Light heroes have. Their stats are just higher than the average heroes, so that makes sense. But she also has Petrify on her basic attacks, and because she is like the 3rd or 4th fastest hero in the game, this can actually be a problem. This is what screws over heroes like Ice Blink and Queen in the first turn, because she has a pretty good chance to petrify them, and she's probably faster than them too. So in those circumstances, she can ruin their ability to actually do work. So she's just my favorite for Dark. Of course, Sleepless and Bloodblade, or Das Moog, sorry, both amazing heroes, but my favorite is Dark Arthendal. And for the Light, I'm actually torn between Asmodel and Michelle. Both are amazing heroes. Asmodel is my personal favorite because I think they're both very useful depending on your team setup and stuff like that. I'm just gonna be completely honest here. I pick Asmodel for 2 reasons. 1, I'm closer to making him myself, so I'm biased in that regard. And 2, I just find he looks cooler than Michelle, so personally, I just go with him. But I can see it. If you want to make a case for Michelle, I completely understand. It's basically more of a supportive role versus more of a DPS role, and I'll take the DPS role myself, so that's just my choice. You can't go wrong with any of the light heroes. Even Gurk in the right team is actually pretty strong because of his bulk heal and stuff like that, and he has counterattack. Though they need to buff this. If they buffed Gurk's counterattack, he would be such a good hero. But because they keep it at 35%, that's just so shitty. But anyway, guys, I think this video is run a little bit longer than I intended it. I might have been better off splitting it into 2 videos, but ultimately I wanted to get it done as a single form. So It took a little while. Again, thank you very much for watching, guys. If you like the content, make sure to thumbs it up. And if you want to see more content like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well as the little bell notification so that you get updates whenever videos come through. And like I said at the beginning of the video, go check out Gaming with Geo. He's an awesome Idle Heroes content creator. He just hit 1,000 subs, so go over to his channel and spam congrats on his newest video. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.